Hey, step away from that car. We got reports of a stalker out here.
Sir, I'm doing my job.
Yeah? Doing what?
Officer, I need you to back up right now.
Who the hell you think
The federal probation officer. Your body cam just captured you blowing an active investigation. Congratulations.
On a clear, quiet afternoon in Redwood Heights, a rookie officer made a mistake so reckless it detonated a federal investigation and nearly got an innocent man, a federal officer, killed. His body cam captured every second of it. The footage begins with a black man standing beside a parked sedan, watching a vehicle down the block with laser-focused attention. He's calm, controlled, working. But rookie officer Daniel Keene storms into frame, hyped and ready for a confrontation. "Hey, step away from that car! We got reports of a stalker out here!" Within seconds, Keene escalates, grabs for cuffs, and pushes a federal officer to the brink of blowing his cover. Then the man lifts a gold badge. "Federal probation officer, and your body cam just captured you blowing an active investigation." What happened next cost the department $7.9 million and ended Teen's career before it ever started. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light.
Redwood Heights, a suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Sacramento, California. Mid-afternoon on a Wednesday in early September. The kind of day where the heat had broken, but the sun still felt warm. Where residential streets were quiet except for the occasional car passing. Where people were at work and children were still in school. Darius Cole, 38 years old, sat in his unmarked sedan parked on Maple Street, his eyes fixed on a house 3 doors down. He'd been there for 2 hours, maintaining visual surveillance on a gray Honda Civic parked in the driveway of that house. The car belonged to Trent Williams, a federal probationer who'd violated the terms of his supervised release by failing to report, cutting off his ankle monitor, and disappearing for 3 weeks. Darius was a federal probation officer with the U.S. Probation and Pretrial Services Office. 12 years of experience supervising high-risk offenders, conducting investigations, and apprehending probation violators. He wasn't a glorified social worker checking in on people. He tracked dangerous individuals who demonstrated they couldn't follow court orders, who often had weapons violations, who sometimes chose to run rather than face consequences. That Wednesday, Darius was working a fugitive apprehension case. Trent Williams had been convicted of federal weapons trafficking, served 4 years, been released on supervised probation with strict conditions. When he cut his monitor and vanished, the court issued a violation warrant. The U.S. Marshals Service would eventually handle the actual arrest, but Darius's job was to locate Williams first, gather intelligence, confirm his whereabouts, establish patterns of movement. Through investigative work, interviewing associates, checking phone records, surveillance of known contacts, Darius had identified Williams's girlfriend's house in Redwood Heights as a likely location. He'd been conducting surveillance for 3 days, documenting vehicle arrivals and departures, noting patterns, waiting for Williams himself to appear. The surveillance was completely legal. Darius was on a public street, observing a house where a fugitive was believed to be hiding, gathering information for a federal warrant. He'd coordinated with his supervisor at the probation office, who knew his location and checked in every 30 minutes via encrypted phone calls. He wore civilian clothes to avoid drawing attention. His federal credentials were in his jacket pocket. His service weapon was holstered at his hip, concealed. Everything was textbook professional surveillance, patient, methodical, documented, coordinated with proper authorities. He'd done this type of work hundreds of times over 12 years without incident. Locate the fugitive, confirm presence, coordinate with the marshals for safe apprehension. No drama, no mistakes. But Darius also knew that being a black man sitting in a car in a suburban neighborhood could trigger suspicion from residents who'd never consider that he might be law enforcement. He'd dealt with that reality his entire career, being questioned about his presence in spaces, having his legitimacy doubted, needing to prove he was a federal officer rather than being assumed to be one. That Wednesday afternoon, his awareness of that reality would prove justified. Would you have kept your cool the way Darius did if a cop rushed you during a federal operation? Officer Daniel Keene, 24 years old, had been with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department for exactly 3 months and 8 days. He'd graduated from the academy with passing but unremarkable scores, been assigned to patrol in the Redwood Heights sector after minimal field training, and was operating with the dangerous combination of minimal experience and maximum desire to prove himself.
His training file contained warnings that had been noted but not adequately addressed. Officer Keene demonstrates impulsive decision-making under pressure, tendency to escalate situations that could be resolved through communication, needs additional work on de-escalation and threat assessment, recommend extended field training before solo patrol authorization. But extended training cost money and time the department didn't want to invest. Keene met minimum qualifications, and bodies were needed on patrol. So he'd been cleared for solo duty with those warnings simply filed away. His 3 months of patrol had been frustrating for him. Mostly routine calls, minor traffic stops, paperwork, the mundane reality of police work. He wanted action, wanted to make arrests, wanted to prove he could handle dangerous situations. That desire made him see threats and opportunities for enforcement in situations where more experienced officers would recognize routine, legal activity. At 2:47 p.m. that Wednesday, dispatch transmitted a call. Suspicious person, Maple Street, Redwood Heights. Caller reports male subject sitting in vehicle for extended period, watching houses, possible stalking behavior. The call had come from Mrs. Helen Morrison, a 71-year-old resident who'd noticed Darius's car parked on the street for hours, and it decided his presence must be criminal. She called 911 not because she'd observed any specific illegal activity, but because she'd seen a black man sitting in a car, and her brain had translated that into "doesn't belong here, must be up to something." Keene responded immediately, his adrenaline spiking at the possibility of actual police work. He didn't request backup, didn't call for additional information about the suspicious behavior, didn't consider that someone sitting in a car might have perfectly legal reasons for being there. He just responded fast, eager, ready for confrontation. His AXON body cam activated as he pulled his patrol car onto Maple Street and spotted Darius's sedan. The footage captured his rapid approach, his aggressive body language, his hand already positioned near his service weapon before he'd gathered any information about the situation. Who do you think is more dangerous, an inexperienced officer or an unchecked one? The footage that would later be viewed over 20 million times across various platforms showed exactly what happened when inexperience met bias, when eagerness overrode judgment, when assumptions replaced assessment. The body cam perspective captured Darius from about 10 feet away, a black man in his late 30s, wearing jeans and a casual jacket, standing beside his sedan, his eyes focused down the street toward the Target house. His posture was relaxed but alert, the stance of someone working, observing, professional. His hands were visible at his sides. His demeanor communicated calm competence rather than furtive behavior. Everything about the scene should have suggested to a trained observer that this was law enforcement conducting surveillance. The unmarked but well-maintained vehicle, the professional attire, the focused observation rather than nervous scanning, the confidence of someone who had every right to be exactly where he was. But Keene didn't observe. He reacted.
The audio captured his approach. Rapid footsteps, elevated breathing, voice already raised before he'd assessed anything. "Hey, step away from that car. We got reports of a stalker out here." Darius turned slowly, his movements deliberate, his expression shifting from focused concentration to recognition of a problem. His voice was calm, controlled, carrying authority. "I'm working. Back up." The body cam captured Keene's response. Not de-escalation, not inquiry, but escalation. His hand moved toward his handcuffs. His shoulders squared. His voice took on edge. "Yeah? Doing what?" The footage showed the power dynamics clearly. Keene operating on adrenaline and assumption,
Darius operating on 12 years of professional experience, and the knowledge that any wrong move could turn this encounter deadly. The rookie officer seeing defiance, the federal officer seeing danger. Darius's voice remained level but carried unmistakable warning. "Officer, I need you to back up right now." Keene interpreted this as challenge to his authority, rather than instruction from someone who understood the situation better than he did. "Who the hell you think you're—" The body cam captured the critical moment. Darius's hand moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into his jacket pocket. Keene's hand moved to his service weapon, his body tensing, preparing to draw on a federal officer conducting a lawful surveillance. Do you think Keene would have reacted the same way if Darius didn't fit the caller's bias? Then Darius's hand emerged from his jacket holding a black leather credential case. He flipped it open with practiced motion, holding it at eye level so the body cam would capture it clearly. A gold badge, unmistakably federal, with official identification beneath. Darius Cole, U.S. Probation Officer, District of Eastern California. Federal Probation Officer. The body cam captured Keene's face perfectly. The instant transition from aggressive confidence to dawning horror. His hand dropped from his weapon, his mouth opened but no words came. His eyes moved between the badge and Darius's face, his brain struggling to process that he'd just confronted a federal officer during an active investigation. Darius snapped the credential case closed, his voice carrying cold authority and barely controlled anger. "Your body cam just captured you blowing an active investigation under active warrant. Congratulations." The surveillance was compromised. The house was now alerted to police presence, a marked patrol car parked conspicuously on the street, a uniformed officer confronting someone in what residents would interpret as an arrest situation. If Williams was inside or arrived and saw the scene, he'd recognize law enforcement and flee before the marshals could coordinate the arrest. 3 months of investigative work, weeks of surveillance, coordination with federal authorities, all potentially destroyed because a rookie officer saw a black man sitting in a car and decided that must be criminal. At this point, what would you have done if you were Darius?
Darius pulled out his encrypted phone and called his supervisor at the probation office, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Sir, I've been confronted by a local deputy during surveillance. Cover is blown. Target house is alerted. We need to pull back and reassess." His supervisor's response was immediate. Coordinate with the marshals, document everything, and filed a formal interference complaint. The investigation was being compromised not by clever fugitive evasion, but by a rookie cop's racial profiling. The surveillance team that had been positioned at various points around the neighborhood, other probation officers, a marshal observing from a different vantage point, all had to abort. They pulled back, hoping Williams hadn't been tipped off yet, knowing they'd have to start surveillance planning from scratch. Williams, who'd been inside the girlfriend's house, had indeed noticed the commotion. He'd seen the patrol car, seen Keene confronting someone, recognized the signs of law enforcement activity. Within an hour, he'd slipped out the back, called a friend for pickup, and disappeared again. It would take another 5 weeks to relocate him, this time in a different state, requiring coordination with out-of-state probation offices and additional marshals' resources. All because Keene had seen a black man sitting in a car and assumed Stalker rather than considering law enforcement. Keene stood frozen on the street, beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. Darius didn't stay to educate him. He had a compromised investigation to report, a supervisor to brief, and a fugitive who was now alerted and mobile. Keene returned to his patrol car and called his sergeant, his voice shaky. "Sarge, I've got a situation. I confronted someone on surveillance, and it turns out he's a federal probation officer. I think I messed up their case." Sergeant Linda Patterson arrived within 15 minutes, having coordinated with dispatch to get the full details. She was a 17-year veteran who'd seen rookie mistakes before, but recognized immediately that this one carried federal implications. She pulled Keene aside, her voice low but undismayably angry. Walked me through what happened. Keene's account revealed the cascade of failures. Received vague stalking call, arrived and saw a black man sitting in car watching houses, assumed criminal activity, confronted without gathering information, escalated when the subject told him to back off, nearly drew weapon, finally saw federal credentials. Did you run the plate before approaching? No, ma'am. Did you observe any actual illegal activity? He was just sitting there watching. Sitting in a car isn't illegal. Surveillance is legal. Did you consider he might be law enforcement? I didn't think. No, you didn't. You responded to a vague call from a resident who was probably just uncomfortable seeing a black man in the neighborhood, and you immediately assumed criminal activity, then confronted a federal officer conducting official duties, compromised his investigation, and nearly pulled your weapon on him. She'd already made the call to internal affairs before arriving. This wasn't just a rookie mistake. This was interference with federal law enforcement, racial profiling, and a near use of force against a federal officer. The consequences would extend far beyond department discipline. Do you think the department tried to protect Keene or themselves?
The U.S. Probation Office filed a formal complaint with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department within 24 hours, documenting the interference with federal operations. The complaint was copied to the U.S. Marshals Service, the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, and the Civil Rights Division. The complaint detailed, Officer Keene confronted a federal officer during lawful surveillance. Officer Keene ignored identification and professional directives. Officer Keene's presence and marked vehicle compromised operational security. Officer Keene's actions resulted in fugitive being alerted and fleeing. Officer Keene's actions were based on racial profiling rather than legitimate suspicion. The department's internal affairs investigation ran parallel to the federal review. IA examined Keene's training file, his pattern of stops during his brief career, his response to the surveillance situation, and the body cam footage that captured everything. The analysis revealed concerning patterns. Keene had made 34 stops or investigations during his 3 months of solo patrol. 26 of those had involved black individuals, 76% of his enforcement actions in an area where black residents comprised 19% of the population. Of those 26 stops, 23 had resulted in no citation, arrest, or evidence of criminal activity. He was initiating contact with black people based on presence rather than behavior, generating false positives at a rate that proved racial bias. His supervisors had documented concerns during field training, tends to see threats where none exist, particularly with minority subjects. Needs coaching on when not to initiate contact. Recommend additional supervised time before solo clearance. All ignored because staffing needs outweighed proper training. The body cam footage became the centerpiece of both investigations. Federal reviewers watched it frame by frame, Keene's aggressive approach, Darius's calm professionalism, the escalation despite clear directives, the near weapon draw, the shocked realization when credentials were shown. One federal reviewer noted in the investigation file, Officer Keene approached a federal officer conducting lawful surveillance with immediate aggression based solely on the officer's race. His inability to recognize professional law enforcement behavior, combined with his escalation despite clear warnings, created a situation that could have resulted in violence against a federal officer. This represents both individual failure and institutional failure in training and supervision. The Sacramento County Sheriff faced a choice: take accountability immediately or fight the federal complaints and inevitable lawsuit. The body cam evidence made fighting impossible. The county's insurance carrier reviewed the footage and advised immediate settlement negotiations to avoid a trial that would generate even more negative publicity and likely result in a larger verdict. Keene was terminated within 6 weeks of the incident. The termination letter was direct. Officer Keene's actions on September 11th constituted gross misconduct. He confronted a federal officer conducting lawful duties based on racial profiling. He compromised a federal fugitive investigation. He escalated a situation that posed no actual threat. His pattern of stops demonstrates racial bias. He is unsuitable for law enforcement.
His post-certification was revoked. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index. He would never work in law enforcement again in any state. Darius Cole filed a comprehensive federal civil rights lawsuit 9 months after the incident. The complaint named Officer Daniel Keene individually, his field training supervisor, and the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. The legal claims were extensive. Count 1. Interference with federal law enforcement. Keene's confrontation disrupted a lawful federal investigation, resulting in a fugitive fleeing and requiring additional resources to relocate and apprehend. Count 2. Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful detention. Keene detained Darius without reasonable suspicion, based solely on a vague call and racial assumptions. Count 3. 14th Amendment violation. Racial discrimination. Keene's stop was motivated by racial bias, as evidenced by his pattern of disproportionate stops of black individuals. Count 4. Assault on a federal officer. Keene's near draw of his weapon while confronting a federal officer constituted assault under federal law. Count 5. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Being confronted at gunpoint while conducting federal duties, having his investigation compromised, and facing the possibility of violence caused severe distress. Count 6. Municipal liability. The department's inadequate training, ignored warnings about Keene's bias, and clearing him for duty, despite documented concerns, enabled the violations. The lawsuit sought $12 million in damages, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and comprehensive reforms. The county settled for $7.9 million 13 months after the incident. The settlement included $7.9 million payment to Darius Cole, Officer Daniel Keene permanently barred from law enforcement, terminated, decertified, NDI entry ensuring unemployability in any law enforcement capacity, and comprehensive department reforms.
Mandatory training on recognizing federal law enforcement operations, protocol requiring verification of vague suspicious person calls before approach, extended field training to minimum 20 weeks with no exceptions, monthly analysis of stop patterns by race with immediate intervention for disparities, zero tolerance for stops based on resident discomfort rather than criminal behavior, federal liaison position to coordinate law enforcement operations, public acknowledgement, written statement acknowledging Keene's conduct violated federal law and constitutional rights, endangered a federal officer, and reflected institutional training failures. Has America actually learned, or just apologized loudly and changed nothing? The body cam footage from that September afternoon became more than just evidence in a lawsuit. It became a case study used in training programs across the country, a reference point in discussions about racial profiling, and a viral video viewed by over 20 million people. But Darius Cole's experience wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern that federal law enforcement officers of color have been experiencing for years, rarely with such clear documentation. Black FBI agents had been stopped and detained while conducting surveillance in suburban neighborhoods, assumed to be suspicious rather than federal investigators. Black DEA agents had been confronted while executing warrants, mistaken for the criminals they were arresting. Black U.S. Marshals had been challenged at courthouses where they worked, assumed to be defendants rather than law enforcement. The pattern revealed something fundamental, that even federal badges, even professional conduct, even clear identification couldn't always override the assumption that black people in certain spaces must be criminal rather than legitimate. That racism operated so deeply that it could make a rookie cop see a stalker where a trained observer would recognize surveillance, see a threat where logic indicated a professional, see criminality where evidence showed law enforcement.
Darius returned to his work with the probation office, though the incident left lasting impact professionally and personally. He'd spent 12 years building a reputation for effective professional supervision of high-risk offenders, having an operation compromised not by clever fugitive evasion, but by a rookie's racism became a permanent mark on his record. The fugitive, Trent Williams, was eventually located and arrested 5 weeks after the Maple Street incident, but only after additional federal resources had been expended to find him in Nevada. He was returned to federal custody to serve the remainder of his sentence, with additional time added for the probation violations. The cost of his extended freedom, financial, operational, public safety, stemmed directly from Keene's interference.
3 years after the incident, Darius reflected in an interview. I've supervised some of the most dangerous probationers in the system. I've tracked fugitives across state lines. I've conducted surveillance operations in high-crime areas. And I've never had an operation compromised by the people I was tracking. They understand the game. They know how to evade surveillance. But a 3-month rookie saw me sitting in a car and thought Stalker, instead of noticing everything that would have told him I was law enforcement? That's not a training failure. That's a society failure. It's what happens when black people are presumed criminal in any context until we prove otherwise. The reforms implemented in Sacramento County showed measurable results. Stop disparities decreased by 58% in the first year after the new protocols were implemented. The federal liaison position prevented 3 potential confrontations with federal officers in the following 18 months by ensuring proper coordination. Officers showing concerning stop patterns were identified and retrained before serious violations occurred. But the broader lesson extended beyond one department's reforms. The incident forced a national conversation, again, about how racial bias operates in law enforcement, how assumptions override evidence, how black professionals doing their jobs can still be presumed criminal even while conducting lawful surveillance for their own protection. The body cam footage remains online, a permanent record of what happens when bias meets authority. Keene's aggressive approach, Darius's professional composure, the escalation, the near violence, the shocked realization, the $7.9 million price tag. The video serves as both warning and evidence. Warning about what happens when departments clear unsuitable officers for duty. Evidence that accountability is possible when violations are documented with perfect clarity. But it also serves as a reminder that no achievement, no badge, no federal authority fully protects black professionals from being presumed criminal. The Darius Cole, 12-year federal officer, experienced investigator, professional conducting lawful surveillance, could be treated as a stalker simply for sitting in a car while black. Assumptions cost lives. In this case, they cost a career, a federal investigation, and the county nearly $8 million. But the real cost is measured in the cumulative weight of being presumed guilty, the exhaustion of having to prove legitimacy, the knowledge that even federal credentials can't always override racial assumptions.